out there. Perfect. We're big fans of Chad and CMO Zen at Summit Venture Studio and the Midday Connect. He's been a great contributor. If you're not following him on LinkedIn, I would recommend it because he's thoughtful and shares a lot of good content and guidance. So without further ado, Chad Jardine.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let's fire this up. Is that coming through okay for everybody? I thought it would be fun to kind of play off the Olympics a little bit with the faster, higher, stronger. But I'm excited to talk about some of the things that I've been spending some time on in terms of incorporating AI into our process. And I want to give a caveat too. I appreciate that I know a bunch of you, so I feel like I'm at least among friends if I do something like this. But I'm not an AI expert. I'm not somebody who's where my career is or where I've pivoted my whole career around AI. What I'm interested and I'm curious and I feel like I'm sold on the promise of what AI is bringing. It's changing our lives in really interesting ways. I think part of that is I tend to be a little bit of a late adopter. So AI has been, kind of, a center stage part of our world for a little less than 2 years, maybe. Kind of what December of like 2022 was when ChatGPT was released. And so I have kind of been in wait and see mode. I definitely see the benefits in marketing, but I've been kind of waiting to watch people deploy AI in ways that, I don't know, I guess I'm waiting for others to take the first knocks of putting AI to use. And so what I show you today is now I feel like that there are some opportunities to deploy AI that are driving real benefits for us at CMO Zen. And so to kick that off, just a token nod to the approximately 300x premium that AI companies are generating from investors right now. How did you get budget approval for all this? I just told them the name of the project. I want to jump in and kind of use, so Spencer mentioned that CMO Zen and Summit Venture Studios, who's behind Midday Connect, have been allies for a long time. A long time in terms of our relative lifespans as companies. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what that looked like. So Summit was around for a little bit, maybe about a year before CMO Zen started. And early on, we were talking about this, and I was super impressed at what Taylor and Spencer were putting together. This model was interesting to me. I had known these guys through their time at the tech transfer office at the U. I was coming out of being a CMO for GoReact, which was a tech transfer product from BYU. Thought that what they were doing was super interesting. And one of the interesting things about it was, in a normal kind of venture model, a huge part of the investment is the team. And these guys were pulling products, or kind of like even almost products, out of universities that didn't have that around them. And so the operational structure of the company was one of the challenge. I mean, you kind of see how well they've solved that since. But in those early conversations, we were like, okay, what do we do on the marketing side? Would it be helpful for us to kind of create a system where a product that didn't have a marketing operation, that the early marketing research about the validation for the product and its reception in the market, and the early operations about finding the channels that would ultimately deliver product market fit, how would we stand those up? And so we started by putting together a library of playbooks. And this just gives you kind of a taste of what these kind of things are, but they're the things you would expect, right? The early go-to-market foundations. Who's the customer? How does the product solve their problem? How are we going to talk about that problem? How are we going to seek validation from this customer in the market? And in addition, so we built out a library of playbooks. We initially had a tool called Process Street. In fact, we still both use Process Street pretty regularly. And Process Street is a tool that kind of converts a marketing playbook, or really any operational playbook, allows you to build it out kind of like an LMS. Or I can take step by step and go through how would I execute this project? And so that gave us a place to kind of institutionalize the IP around these projects and say, okay, if I want to take one of these projects, like let's say that I want to create a positioning statement. Well, now I have a way to institutionalize that. Say, I'm going to start at point A, I'm going to complete these steps, and when I come out at point B, I've got that thing. And so that put us in a position to where we could standardize a lot of what we were delivering for clients at CMO Zen. And so since then, I took that and I kind of baked it in. I evolved that towards more of what I was working at with clients outside of the Summit ecosystem, where they had certain elements and we needed to kind of pull them together. And I created a thing that I called the 2-day marketing MBA. I felt like I could do that because I teach actual MBA students, and so what was the whole big idea with 2 days? And I'll share these links in the chat in just a sec. Was could I get it to where the early things that people needed to do to get their marketing off the ground could be done as fast as possible? So essentially, with this mini course, and you see all these courses all the time that are like, oh, you take 2 weeks, or it's like a summit and you have to be on site for 2 days. And I was like, that's just too big. So could I take something that you could read in 2 hours, actually execute in 2 days, that would deliver these kind of marketing foundations, deliver a marketing strategy, a plan, a budget, a timeline, and a recipe for scale in terms of understanding the KPIs. And so that's what this was. And then I took the projects that are attached in there, like this is our buyer persona template, and this allows us to go in and adapt this to whatever the buyer persona is for different companies. This is one of our buyer committee tools. So over here you can see this is all color coded. So this is motivation minus friction and concerns. That's a recipe for velocity of customer adoption. Over here, right, where does BANT criteria live in the org chart of a B2B sale? And then another one is what we call the watering hole analysis. And with the watering hole, what we would do is, let me show you just real quick kind of how this goes manually. So what we would do is the watering hole is designed to, if I know who my ideal customer profile is or my buyer persona is, but I'm not sure where to reach them. This is a place where people often get stuck, right? There's so many potential marketing channels. There's like people look around and they see that it seems like everybody else is doing 1,000 different things at 100 miles an hour and they feel like they're standing still. And so, well, how do we take that and carve that up into a project where let's take those channels and get them into a list where we can manage them? And so what we would do is we would start with this and we would take our customer keyword, right? So in this case, let's say our buyer persona was truck drivers. And then we would match that up with one of these channels like Reddit. And we'd do a Google search on that, take, say, the top 2 pages, right, which would be the top 20 results, and throw them into a spreadsheet. And then this is like the list of, we'd go through this whole list of channels. And there's probably others, but this would usually give us a pretty good idea of where people in that target demographic are going to find information, right? That's why we called it the watering hole. Where do they go to learn about something that to solve their problem the way that we want to solve it? And so the outcome of that is a spreadsheet like this, a list of channels on one side. And we start to go and rank order them, right? Prefer is essentially, there's no objective standard for which channels are best. But we'd say, we'd rank these within a conversation with the client about, what do you think? Do you think that, does this make sense that our target customer actually is here? And we'd rank that on a scale of 1 to 5. And then we'd take a look at the cost. So maybe we don't know, we don't have a detailed estimate for each item, but we can just use like t-shirt sizes and estimate the cost. And then we could weight those, and now we had a criteria on which to rank order the channels. And now let's say, okay, I'm going to start by in the next calendar quarter, I'm going to take the top 5 channels and I'm going to run tests in each of these. I'm going to decide what the metrics are to decide if they're working or not. And what used to be this kind of feeling about voodoo and pixie dust about marketing has now turned into something that's very scientific and concrete. I have a discrete timeline. I know roughly how much I'm going to spend, right? I don't have blank checks or an empty budget. And I know how to measure whether these are working or not. And the ones that do work, then I can double down on. The ones that don't, toss them out. And then I'm going to take the next 5 or whatever and do those the next quarter. And so in a very scientific way, we can rapidly get to which channels are working. That's great. This process for somebody to do manually takes usually a day or a day and a half just to do the research, just to pull the lists. So from here, I got introduced to this tool. This was kind of a fun thing. So I was at the Silicon Slopes Marketing Summit, which happened this past April, and I met an old investor friend. He'd come and spoken in my venture capital class, and he was telling me about this company he was really excited about, and they were presenting. They had a booth at the event, and it was the team at Enhanced AI. And so we had Brad and Edgar and Will were there, and I met them, and they introduced me to their product, which is called Flux Prompt. So this is an AI product from a local company, and let me show you kind of what it looks like. So this is what their product looks like. And I realize I'm zoomed out, but it's a canvas, right? Each of these nodes I can drag around. And so I could take this canvas and, oops. Oh, I got logged out. Just a second. Let me see if this one's still logged in. Okay, I'm still logged in here. So I can take this canvas and let me switch back over to the watering hole. Oh, shoot. Okay, just a second. Let me go off camera while I log back in, because you're going to want to see this. So each of those, it looks kind of like Lucid Charts or Miro board or something like that. And each of those items is like a function. And some of them are AIs. So there you go. Okay, everybody can see this okay? I'm back on? Okay, so let me zoom in a little bit because it's hard to see out here. So in this case, right, this is the first setup of the watering hole. I've got this node right here is pulling data from a Google form, and this is an AI node right here. Before I show you exactly how this works, I just want you to see some of the cool things about this. So here's my prompt. I'm pulling the prompt from this data, and I can give it instructions. I can give it, a persona, and right here I can tell it which AI do I want it to use. So in this case, I'm using OpenAI, but I'm back on 3.5. I'm not using 4.0 for this particular flow, but I could use Anthropic, right? That's Claude. I could use Perplexity, Grok, any of these. And even among the OpenAI models, I can choose which OpenAI model I want to use. So if I was using the latest, it'd be 4.0. But you've probably seen people say, oh, hey, you maybe don't want to use the most recent version of ChatGPT for certain queries. And so I can come in here and select that. I can adjust these things. Temperature is essentially giving me how creative the output is. Well, a lot of times for these workflows, I want the output not to be creative. I want it to be very consistent. And so this allows me to kind of control for that. And I can string these together as many as I want. So maybe Claude is the right tool to use to write a certain piece of content, but ChatGPT is the right tool to use to analyze some data or to create a different output. This allows me to kind of string those all together. So in this case, I built this workflow here does all of the manual work, or most of the manual work of the watering hole analysis. And when I run it, it gives me an output. In this case, I started with I have a Google form, and here's my answer. So I was thinking about one of the SVS companies that we work with is Medcart. They're getting ready to do a webinar focused on nursing, emergency nursing in rural areas. And so I was like, well, let's take a look and see what we could find about nursing educators. So I put in nursing educators, and then I have these different tiers of, these just represent the channels that I'm looking for. And so I plug that in, right? And Google Forms will kick that into a spreadsheet. Not very complex here, right? I've got one two fields. But the Flux prompt will pull that in and use that to run the queries. So when I run that in about 4 minutes, it's given me a list here of 145 or maybe 144 rows of channels. And so in 4 minutes, I was able to, and this probably takes another half an hour maybe for somebody to manually review and kick out the things that the AI got that were wrong. But that's still 34 minutes to do a project that used to take me a day or a day and a half. In the 2-day marketing MBA, I set aside 6 hours, one working day to do this project. And using this AI tool, I can do it in really less than an hour. So let me show you another. That's the watering hole. Here's another example of something that. So we did this with the summit companies, and we do this with most of our clients. Is can we pull together their core brand documents? And so we have a template for this brand Bible that we call it. And this is essentially the content. So right now I'm going to ignore the visual identity piece. That's useful, but I'm going to ignore it for right now. Just look at the messaging piece. So these are kind of the core pieces of content for the company. So here, these are things that you'll be familiar with, right? Your mission, vision, and values, brand positioning statement, the company's persona or personality. Like if I was going to hire writers to produce content, I need to give them some guidance about what's the tone that's appropriate for this company. These things down here, right? My USP and product description, elevator pitch, things like that. The blurbs, like I'm going to take those company blurbs, and every time I go to an event, they're going to ask me for a blurb about the company. I don't want my team members rewriting that every time. I just want to be copying and pasting that. Same thing with the executive bios, right? If my CEO is giving a talk at an event, or maybe he's doing a webinar or something like this, I want to be able to just copy and paste those bios like that. So let me flip back to Flux prompt, and this is the brand messaging flow that I built, and I'm going to zoom in and show you a couple of things. So these items down here, I just built those and put them on the side, and they're ways for me to grab training data. So for example, this node is a web reader, so it will scrape a website and give me the content on the website. And then this is an AI node that I can put on top of that kind of converts that into plain language. So let's say that I want to write something in my own tone of voice. I could go to my blog, pull like 10 articles that I thought were my best 10, feed those into the web scraper, and then just put the content of all 10 and copy and paste them into a little text node like this. This guy up here essentially does the same thing, but adds the ability to transcribe videos. So maybe I've got a bunch of videos on YouTube that are talking about exactly what I want. I can come in here, plug the YouTube link in here, transcribe them, clean that data up, and then copy and paste that into a text node. And now I've got a great library of training data. It's not huge, right? It's not hundreds of thousands of entries, but it's a starting point. And so what I did here is let's take a look at the vision statement, and then I'll run this for Summit Venture Studio, and we'll see what comes out. Ultimately, the inputs that I give this are the company website, the company name, and the CEO's name, and then let it run. So here for the vision statement, I'm having it's reading the website. So I have the content of the Summit website. And then down here, I've got some vision statement training. So this is a bunch of articles that I just found online, plug those in about what's a great vision statement? Well, how's it formatted? What should it say? What should it mean? This one I particularly liked was from Asana. And then I also grabbed a Simon Sinek video, transcribed the video from YouTube and dropped that in. And all of these things are feeding in as training data for this. And then I have the prompt built in here. So my persona is, right, I want the AI to act as an expert copywriter and brand marketer. And then the prompt is, write the vision statement. The instructions are specific details about exactly how I want that formatted. And then the output is here. So this is saying, based on Summit's website and what the AI now thinks a great vision statement is, this is the vision statement: a world where university innovations transform into thriving startups, driving societal progress and delivering exceptional returns for investors. Now, here's the thing about that. It's wrong. That's not what someone would write for themselves, right? But it's still useful. If I was going to sit here and compose all of these pieces, right, I would maybe spend a day or two to compose all these different pieces, and then I would still need to go to the client and say, here's based on what I've been able to learn about your company and synthesizing my brain, here's what I've been able to come up with that I think represents what you believe about the company. And then they would tell me, no, you're wrong. And together we turn that and craft it into something that's useful. So what's great about this is not only is that it's doing the job that I would have done anyway. It's probably not as good, but it's the first draft, 0 to 1, it's way faster. But also it's a little bit of a referendum on the website. So they've been putting out content sometimes for years. And this is a way of saying, is the content that you're putting out, if you don't think this statement means what your company means, then probably your website doesn't mean what you want the company to mean either. So I'm gonna for kicks, I'm gonna run this. I've got these sticky notes point me to where I put the inputs. And I'm gonna hit run. And those little rainbow things, it's gonna go through and do its thing. It's gonna go through every step and all of the things that were in that table of contents that I had for the brand messaging Bible, it's going to create a draft of, and then it's going to push them into a Google Doc for me, which I'll show you here in just a second. I'm going to talk for a minute because while I'm doing this, this takes about a minute and a half to run. But like we zoom in on it, right? Here's one of these nodes is about, okay, I need press release boilerplate. It's not writing the press release for me, but the boilerplate is not where the creativity lives, right? Like I write that once and I'm going to use it for every press release. And so what have I got here? It's like, well, I'm going to do a web search for Summit Venture Studio and press releases. So if the company already has press releases, I'm going to grab that copy and stick it in their brand messaging Bible. If they don't, then I've got some training about how to write PR boilerplates. I'm going to plug that in, and this is going to come up with a PR boilerplate for Summit. And again, remember, it's going to be wrong, but how wrong? It's not 100% wrong. It's, it's maybe 60, 70, 80% right. And with a little bit of fine tuning, now they've got these core messaging docs sitting on their shelf. They can give those to their writing team. They can give those to anybody who's working at the company to come up to speed with what they're all about. Now, some of the more interesting things that I'll show you are things like the tone of their brand voice and things like that. But let me zoom out and let's see if we're done yet. We should be pretty close. Just about done. And then Spencer, you can tell me if you think that, what percentage on or off these are.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is
that I'm ready.
I think it's safe to say that for sure, there we go. Okay, we're all done. For sure, they will not be 100%, and for sure, they will not be 0, right? They're going to be somewhere in the middle. So, okay, here we go. This is all of these things, and I could come in here and if I could come and update my formatting so that this looked prettier. But I got a vision statement, a mission statement. I have a draft of company values and core beliefs. I have my brand personality and brand voice. So this is brand personality. There's a brand tone scale, and this uses that scale. And so we can see, hey, do we believe that we're more serious than we are playful? Is that right? Do we believe that we are more formal than we are friendly and approachable? And all these have their place, right? Depending on who the target customer is. It's given me a draft of a brand voice, so that we're innovative and visionary, and talks about our tone, gives us a contrasting opposite for what's definitely not us. Here's our press release boilerplate. It's given us an elevator pitch that is short, which I think is about 50 words, and long, which is about 100 words. I have company descriptions at 50 words, 100 words, and 250 words. And I've got executive bio on Taylor at 50 words and 100 words. And then it looks like I got something failed in terms of pulling together the company's contact info. But, not bad for a minute and a half. Um, okay. So, kind of bringing this home then, I saw this morning. So, Kieran Flanagan's a marketer that I follow, and he posted this on LinkedIn about being able to build an app using Claude. And in his video, he explains that he's like, check this out. And what he's done is essentially, kind of like the Google Docs version or the Google Forms version of what I showed. But he's like, but in order for this to actually work, I need an integration. I need an API integration in the back end with Claude. Well, that's already built into FluxPrompt. And this isn't meant to be like a product demo for FluxPrompt, but there's some of the FluxPrompt guys are here on the call, and they're doing it. This is just me being creative about how can I solve some of my problems. And they've been kind enough to be super helpful. They spend a lot of time with me figuring these things out. But now I've got a handful of tools working on more that make the type of work that I do on a regular basis, a lot faster and easier. And with fractional work, everybody has more budget than needs. It doesn't matter how big your company is, but when you're small, your list of needs is really big and your budget is really small. And so the more that I can leverage these tools to increase value, especially in these kind of bread and butter projects, that frees me up to spend the limited hours that I have with each client on the highest value activities that I can do for them. And so anyway, I have links for this. Let me drop in the chat. I'll give you links to the 2-day MBA. And then I am doing a webinar next week on how to evaluate effectiveness of marketing channels. Would love to see some of you guys there if that's interesting to you. Let me I'll grab the links, and then let's talk questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for this portion.
So go ahead and come off mute or post it in the chat if you'd like. We can spend the next maybe 7 or 8 minutes with Q&A. Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, thanks for having me, you guys.
Chad, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So when using different kinds of AI models, I know that it can get a little overwhelming. Like you or paying for a subscription for different models. What have you seen be some of the best use cases and models to use for the job that you do? And how do you minimize the expenses in, I guess, your business?
Yeah, so that's a great question because it's hard to know what's worth paying for, right? For at CMOZen, I pay for Midjourney, I pay for OpenAI, so ChatGPT and Dolly, and I pay for FluxPrompt, and those are the ones that I pay for. Now, with FluxPrompt, I have access to Claude and Perplexity and others that I would normally use. So those ones I pay for, but I also pay for a tool called Opus Clips, if you're familiar with that. It's essentially an AI tool for taking video content, usually talking head video content, and breaking it up into shareable clips that are great for Reels and YouTube Shorts and things like that. And none of them are very expensive. What I should say is FluxPrompt is more like the price of a big marketing app. The others are like between $10 and $30. But I think to the heart of your question, I think you have to, even though I'm not willing to pay the price to be an AI developer, the return on that is not there for me. But I do have to pay a price to be conversant in the different tools. So like I try to stay on top of reading, like right now I think Claude's probably in the lead in terms of generating the most human-like content. Still not something that I would release without a human proofreader, but they're kind of in the lead. I think ChatGPT is kind of amazing and really versatile. And inside of, I didn't really show, these are some of the more visual things. I didn't show these, but inside Flux Prompt, there are audio and visual tools. So they have integrations with like Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion is probably number two. I think Dolly's probably three or four in terms of image creators for AI. So they have integrations there that allow me to generate images for, say, like, let's say like I wanted newsletter content, or I wanted social media post content, and I wanted to generate some images to go along with that content. That it's easy to build that type of thing in there. And the audio and the transcribers are really fun too. So I could generate audio blurbs, or I could have it read and transcribe audio or video content, which I think is all useful in its zone.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you
Akira.
so much, Chad.
Other questions for Chad?
Chad, I had a question. This, with my experience with sales, the idea that I've had is kind of do some of your own sales until you feel like you find a process that works before maybe hiring SDRs to replicate it and things like that. I'm curious from a marketing standpoint as well, like similar question. Would you recommend like finding the correct channels and the messaging that works before really diving into how AI could help you in that process, or when would you suggest starting to build out AI tools to even like in the testing stages, maybe? Just curious timeline.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if I was starting like a new role as a sales lead right now, I would be recording and transcribing all my calls, and I would be asking AI questions about those transcripts, and I would be feeding AI training about those transcripts as a way of trying to zero in on my messaging and which parts of my sales conversation were moving the needle the most. I think it would. I don't know of a great way to use AI to do. AI is better at brainstorming messaging than it is testing messaging, because where I want to test messaging is with the customer. Like I can't know if my message is right. The customer is the only one that can tell me. And so I would use AI to brainstorm message ideas, to iterate on messages, and then I would probably be using, like a low budget paid campaign is probably the fastest way to get that in front of people who I think are the target customer, and get a data driven way of measuring what the response rates are. Then I would take all that data and feed it back into the AI to try to improve what I'm doing. Like if I wanted to crunch the numbers on that, I think I might use some AI tools to do that. It's pretty straightforward, but I might use some AI tools to do that, and that would help me know which segments were performing better, which messaging was doing the best. I also might, in terms of coming up with messaging, I have built out in Flux Prompt like a problem statement generator. So essentially, if I break down the process of messaging, I start with the problem, then I'm going to come up with key messages, which are how my product solves that problem, and then I'm going to take those key messages and create samples sample messages that I want to test that are appropriate to different channels, and then I'm going to run a small paid campaign on, let's say, the top 3 or 4 of those. Run that, and by small I mean a few $100s. And I'm going to run those side by side, and that's going to be the first sort of messaging data and validation that I get. It won't be the be all end all, but it's likely to be directional, and it will for sure at least be thoughtful.
Thanks, Chad.
Dad, I also have a question. So when I think about marketing and incorporating AI into our email outreach, one of the biggest challenges I'm having right now in my company, just for some context for everybody, is in education technology. My company, I feel like recently has not been able to get through via cold email very well. And I wondered if you had any suggestions around that, or even just like thoughts about like better stratifying, or what your thoughts on that are. It's not concise, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of two questions. One is cold email, is it a qualitative problem? Like we're not saying the right things in our cold email, or we're not using the right techniques to generate responses. And then there's the question about how cold email stands up against other channels anyway. Like, are there channels that would maybe less expensive to reach those customers than cold email? I think cold email is interesting, and there's examples of cold email working. There's also examples of it not working. So in terms of using AI, I think AI can speed up iterations. So like I'm working on a workflow right now that is like automating building out 12-month nurturing sequences. So the risk on nurturing sequences is kind of low because these are people who already came and said no. So they're there for whatever reason, they haven't unsubscribed, but they didn't buy either. So the risk is pretty low, which means that my quality threshold can be low, and also the time investment I can afford is low. And so it's a good match for AI. But I don't know if I totally answered your question, Fiona, but I think iterating on the qualitative AI is good for, and analyzing the results AI is good for. If the results are really minimal anyway, then you don't need AI's help, right? You can just look at the reports and say, okay, it looks like whatever we're doing here is not working. I think similar to the watering hole that I showed, being able to look at other channels and maybe prioritize them are other areas where AI could help.
Do you find that with the incorporation of AI into some of the email tools that there are more spam blockers, or in like phone calls too, that there are more spam blocker technologies available?
Um,
Have you noticed that?
I haven't been at it long enough. I don't have enough experience to really answer that definitively. I think that there's a little bit of a race between how content is treated, like on the SEO side, where purely AI generated content is the developers on the AI side are trying to get that to look more human. On the search engine side, right, Google and stuff is trying to say, hey, if you're not human, we're going to penalize you. And so there's kind of race, right? And we'll see how that shakes out. I think ultimately, I had the guys at Graybox explained kind of how the AI detection worked to me in a way that was helpful, which was if you think about like predictive text on your phone. So you think about AI's as just a big string of predictive text. So what that means is that you could quantitatively tell, is the next word the most likely word? And so if the AI checkers are looking and say, okay, is this entire paragraph all the most likely words, or within the top 3% of most likely words? And human generated content doesn't follow that pattern. So human generated content, you're going to have a lot of that, and then a bunch of spikes of, oh, that's like the 78th, most likely word. And so thinking about that model, and it's more sophisticated than that, right? Like ultimately, it's both sides of this are really smart and really trying hard. But thinking about that model makes it simple enough for me to say, it's like, okay, well, I can go into my AI prompts and ask it to be unusual. I can ask it to use unusual language. And then as a human, I can go and read it and say, okay, what things could I add to this? But that editing and proofing is just so much faster and easier than the first draft.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Chad, Fiona, Akira, Parker, for the questions that came in. This has been great. Hopefully we'll see you all again here next time, and we'll do it again next week. Until then.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you, Chad.